What if I told you that one of the most electrifying entertainers of our time, a man who built his career on fire, groove, and pure joy, once stood under the blinding lights of Las Vegas and broke down the walls of his own heart, not for fame, not for a crowd, but for someone he could never see again? What if I told you that on the final night of his show at the Dolby Live Theater, Bruno Mars sang a song he swore he would never sing on stage again, and he did it for his mother? That night, the stage wasn't just a stage. It was an altar. And the song, When I Was Your Man, wasn't just a song. It was a goodbye. Before we take you inside that moment, before we let you feel what thousands of people felt as silence swallowed the arena, you need to understand the man behind the spotlight. Because Bruno Mars, the superstar we see in glittering jackets and world-shaking grooves, is also Peter Jean Hernandez, a boy from Honolulu who grew up in the shadow of his mother's voice, a boy whose very soul was stitched together with her love of music. And when she passed away, something inside him shattered. The story of that night cannot be told without rewinding to the very beginning. Bruno Mars was not supposed to survive the industry. A small kid, barely 5 feet 5, in a world obsessed with image, with a style that felt like it came from another era, soul, funk, doo-wop, Motown. They told him it wouldn't sell. But Bruno had a secret weapon, his mother's belief. Bernadette San Pedro Bayo, everyone called her Bernie, wasn't just a parent. She was the gravity that held Bruno's world together. She taught him that music was not about money or fame. It was about truth. And when Bruno Mars stood on that stage at Dolby Live, years after losing her, he carried that truth like a weight, heavy but sacred. Imagine it. The final show of a residency. Fans packed wall to wall. A career filled with platinum records, sold-out stadiums, Super Bowl halftime shows. And yet, in that moment, the only thing that mattered was one woman who wasn't there to see it. The lights dimmed. The crowd roared. But then something unexpected happened. The band didn't strike up the familiar funky riff. There was no explosive horn section, no disco ball spinning overhead. Instead, Bruno Mars sat at a piano, alone, vulnerable, almost trembling. He whispered into the mic, "This one's for my mom." The arena froze. You could feel the breath of thousands of people pause in unison. And then, the opening chords of When I Was Your Man filled the room. But here's the twist, this wasn't just a performance. This was Bruno reliving the most painful wound of his life. Because When I Was Your Man wasn't written for a lover. Not entirely. Many fans believe it was always tied, in some way, to his mother's absence, the regret of not doing more, of not saying more. And that night, it became clear that he sang with cracks in his voice, eyes closed, tears catching in the glow of the spotlight. Every lyric was a confession, every note a prayer. Fans later swore they saw him whisper her name in the silence between verses. Whether that's true or not, only Bruno knows. But the feeling was undeniable, he was singing not to us, but through us. Why would Bruno Mars choose that song, on that night? Why break his own rule? Because sometimes, the last show is not about closing a tour. Sometimes, it's about closure. This was not a random ballad. This was Bernie's favorite. Family friends revealed that she used to hum the melody around the house, long before it ever reached the charts. And on the night of his final show, Bruno Mars gave it back to her, as if the Dolby Live Theater itself had become a bridge between earth and heaven. And yet, the story doesn't end there. Because something else happened that nobody expected. As the last note faded, Bruno Mars didn't rise from the piano. He stayed there, silent, almost as if waiting for an answer. The crowd, sensing the gravity of the moment, didn't cheer immediately. They waited too. In that silence, something sacred passed through the room. And then, slowly, as if breaking a spell, Bruno whispered again, "I hope you heard that, Ma." The audience erupted, not in wild cheers, but in tears, in applause that felt more like an embrace. People held each other, strangers weeping side by side. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was a collective mourning, a collective healing. That is the night we are telling you about. That is the night Bruno Mars turned his final Las Vegas performance into a love letter to the woman who made him who he is, and as powerful as it was in that room, the story gets even deeper, even more mysterious when you uncover the hidden clues he left throughout the show. Clues pointing to this moment, breadcrumbs that only make sense once you realize the ending. So let's rewind. Let's look at how Bruno Mars built this entire residency not just as entertainment, but as a coded message, a slow build to one emotional climax. Because once you see the signs, you'll never watch Bruno the same way again. Bruno Mars has always been a master of illusion. He gives us glitter, swagger, and grooves so smooth they make time itself bend. But behind every smile, behind every joke, there are truths he rarely lets the world see. And in his Las Vegas residency at Dolby Live, he gave us a puzzle, one piece at a time, night after night. Fans thought they were just watching a concert. They thought they were witnessing another Bruno Mars spectacle, tight choreography, flawless vocals, a band so good they feel like a living time machine. But if you looked closer, if you listened carefully, you'd notice the undercurrent of something else. The show was carefully constructed like a story, and from the very beginning, he was laying breadcrumbs toward that haunting finale. Early in the residency, Bruno would often pause after songs and say things like, "Hold on to the ones you love," or "Don't wait until it's too late." At the time, those words blended into the banter of a performer connecting with his audience. But in hindsight, they were warnings. Gentle reminders. A singer hiding his grief inside the cracks of casual conversation. Even his setlist was different. Fans noticed that certain ballads, songs he hadn't performed in years, began appearing again. Songs that spoke of regret, of holding on, of saying goodbye. It was as though the entire residency was a build-up, a carefully crafted path leading to the final night. But why Las Vegas? Why the Dolby Live Theater? Why make this the place to reveal what he had carried for so long? For Bruno Mars, Vegas wasn't just a stop on a tour. It was a stage of reinvention, a space where the legends before him, Sinatra, Elvis, Prince, had poured their souls into the desert air. It was a city built on illusions, but Bruno was about to strip the illusion away. He was going to bear his truth in the very city that thrives on masks, and that truth was his mother. Bernie wasn't just his mom. She was a singer herself, a performer who gave up her own dreams so Bruno could chase his. She used to call him her little Elvis. She dressed him up as a child, put him on stage in Honolulu, and taught him that music was not a career, it was a calling. When she died suddenly of a brain aneurysm in 2013, Bruno Mars was shattered. He said in interviews he could barely function. He threw himself into work, because silence was unbearable. Fans have often wondered, did Bruno Mars ever really grieve in public? Did he ever allow himself to cry on stage? The answer is no. Until that night. Until the final song at Dolby Live, and here's where the story takes a twist. That night, before he sang When I Was Your Man, Bruno Mars gave what felt like a coded speech. He told the audience, "Every show I do, I try to make it the best one. Because you never know when it's the last time. You never know who's watching from up there." Many thought he was talking about fans, or about God. But when you connect the dots, it becomes chillingly clear. He was talking about his mother. Then came the piano. Then came the whisper. Then came the song. Now here's something few people know. In the middle of the performance, Bruno slightly altered the lyrics. Instead of singing, "I should have bought you flowers and held your hand," fans swear they heard him murmur, "I should have called you more, Ma." It was fleeting, almost like a slip, but for those who caught it, it was undeniable. A hidden confession slipped inside the music. The performance wasn't perfect. His voice cracked. He missed a note. His hands trembled. And yet, that's what made it perfect. Because in that imperfection, you could feel the raw wound of a son missing his mother.